The scars on Ezra's face burned hotter than the California sun ever could. He stood outside the sleek glass doors of the tech startup where he worked, his reflection staring back, jagged lines crisscrossing his cheek. A map of the car accident that had stolen his confidence 2 years ago. He'd come to San Francisco to rebuild. But today, he felt like he was crumbling. Ezra adjusted his tie, his fingers trembling. He'd spent weeks preparing for this moment. The pitch to the board that could land him a promotion. A chance to prove he was more than the broken man his boyfriend, Caleb, had called him last night. Caleb's words still stung, sharp as the glass that had sliced Ezra's face in the crash. "You're not who you used to be," Caleb had said, his voice cold, his eyes avoiding the scars. "I can't do this anymore." Ezra had begged, pleaded, but Caleb walked out, leaving Ezra alone in their shared apartment. The silence louder than any rejection. He pushed through the doors, the hum of the office swallowing him. His co-workers' glances lingered too long, their pity cloaked in polite smiles. Ezra had learned to ignore them, but today, every look felt like a blade. He clutched his presentation notes, his lifeline to proving he was still capable, still whole. The boardroom was a sterile box of glass and steel, the kind of place where dreams were made or shattered. Ezra's heart pounded as he set up his slides, each click of the projector echoing like a countdown. The pitch went better than he'd dared hope. His voice, steady despite the nerves, carried the room. He spoke of innovation, of bridging gaps in accessibility tech, his passion since the accident left him grappling with his own limitations. The board nodded, their faces unreadable but attentive. When he finished, the room buzzed with murmurs of approval. "Impressive, Ezra," said Ms. Torres, the CEO, her smile genuine. "We'll discuss and get back to you." For the first time in months, Ezra felt a flicker of pride. He floated through the rest of the day. The weight of Caleb's rejection momentarily lifted. But as he left the office, the city's vibrancy mocked him. Couples strolled hand in hand, their laughter a reminder of what he'd lost. He wandered toward the Mission District, where murals splashed color across every wall, a chaotic beauty that mirrored his own fractured heart. At a small coffee shop tucked between a bookstore and a taco stand, Ezra ordered a black coffee, his usual. The barista, a man with warm brown eyes and a lopsided grin, slid the cup across the counter. "Rough day?" he asked, his voice low, like he could see the storm inside Ezra. Ezra froze, caught off guard. "You could say that," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. The barista's name tag read Luca. He had a sleeve of tattoos peeking out from his rolled-up flannel, and his presence felt steady, like an anchor in Ezra's churning sea. "Chin up," Luca said, tapping the counter. "The city's got a way of surprising you when you least expect it." His smile was small but kind, and Ezra felt something stir, something he hadn't felt since before the accident. He nodded, mumbled a thanks, and left, the coffee warming his hands but Luca's words warming something deeper. That night, Ezra sat in his empty apartment, the silence oppressive. Caleb's belongings were gone, leaving gaps on shelves like missing teeth. Ezra traced the scars on his face, each one a reminder of the crash, the hospital, the months of recovery. He'd been a rising star in tech, confident and charismatic, until the accident stole that version of him. Caleb had stayed through the surgeries, the therapy, but last night proved he'd never truly accepted the new Ezra. His phone buzzed a text from Ms. Torres. Congratulations, Ezra. The board loved your pitch. Promotion's yours. He stared at the words, waiting for joy to flood him, but all he felt was hollow. Success at work couldn't fill the void Caleb had left. He tossed the phone aside and curled up on the couch. The city's hum outside his window a distant lullaby. The next morning, Ezra returned to the coffee shop, almost without thinking. Luca was there again, wiping down the counter with a rag, humming a tune Ezra didn't recognize. Back so soon? Luca teased, his eyes crinkling. I must make a mean coffee. Ezra managed a half-smile. It's not bad. He hesitated, then added, Thanks for yesterday. I needed that. Luca leaned forward, his voice soft. Anytime, man. You look like someone who's carrying a lot. Let me know if you want to talk. He slid another coffee across the counter, this time with a small doodle of a sun on the cup. Ezra's chest tightened not with pain, but with something unfamiliar, something warm. Over the next week, Ezra found himself drawn to the coffee shop daily. Luca's easy banter became a lifeline, pulling him from the fog of Caleb's rejection. They talked about everything: music, the city, the way the fog rolled in like a ghost each morning. Luca never asked about the scars, but his gaze never shied away from them either. It was the first time Ezra felt seen without judgment. One evening, as the shop emptied, Luca invited Ezra to stay after closing. Got a new blend I'm testing, he said, but his eyes suggested it was more than coffee. They sat at a corner table, the city's lights glittering through the window. Luca shared stories of growing up in a small town, where being openly gay meant risking everything. I came here to be free, he said, his voice raw. To find people who see me for me. Ezra's throat tightened. I thought I had that, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. But he couldn't handle this. He gestured to his face, the scars that felt like a brand of failure. Luca's hand rested on his, warm and steady. Those scars, they're just part of your story. Anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve you. The words hit Ezra like a wave, washing away some of the shame he'd carried for so long. As they parted that night, Luca's hand lingered on Ezra's arm, a silent promise of something new. Ezra walked home under the stars, his heart a battlefield of fear and hope. Caleb had broken him, but Luca's kindness was stitching him back together, piece by fragile piece. Ezra's promotion came with a new office, a corner space with a view of the Bay Bridge twinkling at night. It should have felt like a victory, but the glass walls only amplified his isolation. His co-workers' congratulations felt hollow, their eyes still lingering on his scars. He threw himself into work, hoping it would drown out the ache of Caleb's absence. But the emptiness followed him like a shadow. Each evening, he returned to Luca's coffee shop, a ritual that grounded him. Luca's presence was a balm, his laughter a melody Ezra hadn't realized he'd been missing. One night, as rain streaked the shop's windows, Luca slid a steaming latte across the counter, a heart drawn in the foam. For my favorite customer, he said with a wink, and Ezra's face warmed, his scars forgotten for a moment. They started spending more time together outside the shop. Luca took Ezra to hidden corners of the city rooftop garden in Soma, a jazz club in the Fillmore where the music pulsed like a heartbeat. Luca's world was vibrant, unapologetic, and Ezra felt himself unfolding in its light. But doubt lingered. Caleb's rejection had carved a wound deeper than the scars on his face. And every time Luca's hand brushed his, Ezra wondered if he was worthy of this new warmth. One Saturday, Luca invited Ezra to a pride event in the Castro. The streets were a riot of color rainbow flags, glitter, and laughter spilling from every corner. Ezra hesitated at first, his insecurities screaming that he didn't belong in this sea of confidence. But Luca's hand found his, firm and reassuring. "You're here," Luca said, his eyes locking onto Ezra's. "That's enough." They danced in the street, surrounded by strangers who felt like family. Ezra's scars faded into the background, overshadowed by Luca's infectious joy. For the first time since the accident, Ezra felt alive, not just surviving but thriving. Luca's hand in his was an anchor, grounding him in a moment of pure, unfiltered belonging. But the past wasn't done with him. That night, as they sat on a park bench overlooking the city, Ezra's phone buzzed. A text from Caleb, "I miss you. Can we talk?" The words were a punch to the gut, dragging Ezra back to the nights he'd cried himself to sleep, begging Caleb to stay. He stared at the screen, his heart torn between the man who'd broken him and the one who was helping him heal. Luca noticed the shift in Ezra's mood. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle but probing. Ezra hesitated, then showed him the text. Luca's jaw tightened, but he didn't pull away. "What do you want to do?" he asked, his tone steady, giving Ezra the space to decide. "I don't know," Ezra admitted, his voice cracking. "He was my world for so long. But he made me feel like I was less than human." Luca's hand found his again, squeezing gently. "You're more than enough, Ezra. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that anchored Ezra, pulling him back from the edge of doubt. He didn't respond to Caleb's text that night. Instead, he leaned into Luca, their shoulders brushing as they watched the city lights. The moment felt fragile, like it could shatter with one wrong move, but it was also the most real thing Ezra had felt in years. The next week was a whirlwind. Ezra threw himself into his new role at work, leading a team on an accessibility project that felt personal. He poured his heart into it, driven by the memory of his own struggles post-accident. But Caleb's text lingered like a ghost, haunting him at odd moments. He hadn't blocked Caleb's number, and the temptation to respond grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, Luca invited Ezra to his apartment for dinner. It was a small, cozy space filled with plants and vinyl records, a stark contrast to the sterile emptiness of Ezra's own home. Luca cooked pasta, his hands moving with a grace that made Ezra's heart ache. They talked late into the night, their conversation weaving through dreams, fears, and the messy beauty of being human. As Ezra prepared to leave, Luca stopped him at the door. "Whatever you decide about him," Luca said, his voice low, "make sure it's for you. Not for what you think you're supposed to be." He leaned in, his lips brushing Ezra's cheek, a fleeting touch that sent sparks through Ezra's veins. Ezra walked home in a daze, the city's pulse matching his own. Caleb's text was still unanswered, but Luca's words echoed louder. For the first time, Ezra began to wonder if he could choose himself over the pain of his past. Ezra's days began to split into two worlds, the structured chaos of his new role at work and the unpredictable warmth of Luca's company. At the office, he was a leader, his team looking to him for guidance on their accessibility project. He thrived in the challenge, designing software that could change lives people like him, who'd felt broken by circumstance. But outside those glass walls, Luca was teaching him something else: how to live without apology. Their outings grew more frequent. A hike in Marin County, where Luca's laughter echoed through the redwoods. A late-night food truck crawl, where they shared tacos under a starry sky. Each moment with Luca chipped away at the walls Ezra had built around his heart. But Caleb's text remained a splinter, lodged deep. Ezra hadn't responded, but he hadn't deleted it either. It sat in his phone like a landmine, waiting to detonate. One afternoon, while working late, Ezra's phone buzzed again. Another message from Caleb: "I was wrong. I want to see you." His heart lurched. The words were everything he'd wanted to hear a month ago, but now they felt like a betrayal of the person he was becoming. He shoved the phone in his pocket, but the words followed him, whispering doubts. What if Caleb had changed? What if Ezra was throwing away a chance at the life he'd once dreamed of? That evening, he met Luca at a dive bar in the Tenderloin. The place was gritty, alive with the hum of locals and the clink of glasses. Luca was already there, nursing a beer, his smile fading when he saw Ezra's expression. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, sliding a drink toward Ezra. Ezra took a sip, the burn of whiskey grounding him. Caleb texted again. He admitted. He says he was wrong. Luca's face didn't change, but his eyes darkened. "And what do you think?" "I don't know," Ezra said, his voice raw. "I loved him, Luca. For years. He was my everything. But he made me feel like I was damaged goods." Luca leaned closer, his voice steady but fierce. "You're not damaged, Ezra. You're a damn masterpiece, scars and all. If he can't see that, he's the one who's broken." The words hit Ezra like a lifeline, pulling him from the undertow of Caleb's pull. He wanted to believe Luca, wanted to trust the warmth in his eyes, but fear held him back. What if Luca saw the truth one day and walked away, just like Caleb had? They left the bar and wandered the city, the night air cool against Ezra's skin. Luca stopped at a street corner, pointing to a mural of a phoenix rising from flames. "That's you," he said, his voice soft. "You're still rising, Ezra. Don't let anyone pull you back down." Ezra's throat tightened. He wanted to reach for Luca, to close the distance between them, but fear kept his hands at his sides. Instead, he nodded, the mural's vibrant colors burning into his memory. The next day, Ezra agreed to meet Caleb. It was a decision born of desperation, a need to close the chapter that still bled. They met at a quiet cafe in No Valley, a place they'd once called theirs. Caleb looked the same, polished, confident, his blue eyes still sharp enough to cut. But there was something new in his gaze: regret. "I messed up," Caleb said, his voice low. "I wasn't ready for everything. But I miss you, Ezra. I want to try again." Ezra's heart twisted, but not with the longing he'd expected. He saw Caleb clearly now, not as the man he'd loved, but as someone who'd chosen to see only his flaws. "You left when I needed you most," Ezra said, his voice steady. "You made me feel like I wasn't enough." Caleb reached for his hand, but Ezra pulled back. "I've changed," Caleb insisted. "Give me a chance." Ezra shook his head. the weight of his scars lighter than ever. I'm not the same person I was, Caleb. And I'm learning that's okay. He stood, leaving Caleb at the table, his heart pounding with a mix of grief and freedom. That night, Ezra went to Luca's coffee shop, his steps lighter. Luca was closing up, his flannel sleeves rolled up, revealing the tattoos Ezra had grown to love. "You okay?" Luca asked, his eyes searching. Ezra smiled, a real one this time. "I think I will be." He reached for Luca's hand, their fingers intertwining. It wasn't a promise. Not yet. But it was a step toward wholeness. Toward love that didn't demand perfection. Ezra's decision to walk away from Caleb felt like shedding a skin he'd outgrown. The city seemed brighter, its colors sharper, as if San Francisco itself was cheering him on. Work became a refuge, his accessibility project gaining traction with every meeting. His team respected him, their faith in his vision a quiet validation he hadn't realized he craved. But it was Luca who truly anchored him, his presence a steady pulse in Ezra's chaotic world. Their connection deepened with each passing day. Luca introduced Ezra to his friends, a tight-knit group of artists and dreamers who welcomed him without hesitation. They gathered at a loft in the Mission, where music and laughter filled the air. Ezra felt like he belonged, his scars fading into the background of their warmth. Luca's hand often found his, a silent reassurance that Ezra was enough more than enough. But healing wasn't linear. Some nights, Ezra woke in a cold sweat, Caleb's voice echoing in his dreams. "You're not who you used to be." The words clawed at him, threatening to unravel the confidence Luca had helped him rebuild. He'd stare at his reflection in the dark, tracing the scars that still felt like a stranger's face. Was he truly worthy of Luca's kindness? Or was this just another dream destined to shatter? One evening, Luca took Ezra to a quiet beach near Half Moon Bay. The waves crashed softly, the horizon a blend of fire and indigo. They sat on a blanket, sharing a thermos of coffee, the air thick with salt and possibility. Luca's voice broke the silence. "You ever think about what makes you, you?" he asked, his eyes on the ocean. Ezra frowned, unsure where this was going. "All the time," he admitted, "especially since the accident. I keep wondering if I'm still me." Luca turned to him, his gaze fierce. "You're not just your scars, Ezra. You're the guy who lights up a room with his ideas, who fights for people who feel invisible. That's who you are." He paused, then added, "And that's who I'm falling for." The words stole Ezra's breath. Falling for. They hung in the air, heavy with promise. Ezra wanted to say it back, to confess the warmth blooming in his chest, but fear held him back. Instead, he leaned into Luca, their shoulders touching, the ocean's rhythm matching his heartbeat. The next day, Ezra's past reared its head again. A coworker mentioned seeing Caleb at a tech conference, his name now tied to a rival startup. The news shouldn't have mattered, but it did, stirring a cocktail of anger and doubt. Had Caleb moved on so easily? Was Ezra's pain just a footnote in his story? He buried himself in work, but the questions followed him, gnawing at the edges of his newfound strength. That evening, Luca sensed the shift. They were at a rooftop bar, the city sprawling below like a canvas of light. "Talk to me," Luca said, his voice cutting through the noise. "You're carrying something heavy again." Ezra hesitated, then spilled it all Caleb's reappearance. The insecurities it dredged up. Luca listened, his face unreadable but his hand steady on Ezra's. When Ezra finished, Luca said, "He doesn't get to define you anymore. You're writing your own story now." Ezra nodded, the words sinking in. Luca was more than Caleb's rejection, more than the scars that had once defined him. But the fear of losing Luca, of being hurt again, lingered like a storm cloud. He wanted to trust this new love, but trust felt like stepping off a cliff. As they left the bar, Luca pulled Ezra into a quiet alley, the city's hum fading. "I'm not going anywhere," Luca said, his voice low and certain. "But you've got to let yourself believe that." He cupped Ezra's face, his thumb tracing a scar with a tenderness that made Ezra's eyes burn. Then Luca kissed him, soft and sure, and for the first time, Ezra felt like he was home. The kiss lingered in Ezra's mind as he walked home, the city alive around him. He was still broken in places, still healing, but Luca's belief in him was a light guiding him forward. For the first time, Ezra dared to imagine a future where love didn't come with conditions. Ezra's world began to feel like a tightrope, balancing the thrill of Luca's love against the ghosts of his past. Work was a whirlwind. His accessibility project was gaining national attention, with articles praising its innovation. Ezra's name was in headlines, a far cry from the man who'd once hidden from mirrors. But success couldn't erase the doubt that crept in at night, when Caleb's voice whispered through his memories. Luca was a constant, his presence a quiet strength. They spent weekends exploring the city's edge's Golden Gate Park, where they fed ducks under ancient oaks. Chinatown, where they shared dim sum in a crowded diner. Luca's laughter was infectious, his touch a reminder that Ezra was more than his scars. But the intensity of their connection scared Ezra. What if he let Luca in completely, only to lose him? One evening, Luca invited Ezra to a gallery opening in Soma, where one of his friends was showcasing vibrant, abstract paintings. The space buzzed with energy, the crowd a mix of artists and tech types. Ezra felt out of place, his scars drawing curious glances, but Luca's hand on his back kept him grounded. "You belong here," Luca whispered, and Ezra believed him, if only for a moment. As they admired a painting, a swirl of blues and golds that seemed to pulse with Liffy's familiar voice cut through the noise. "Ezra." Caleb stood there, polished in a tailored suit, his eyes wide with surprise. The air thickened, and Ezra's heart stuttered. Luca's hand tightened on his, a silent question. "Caleb," Ezra said, his voice steadier than he felt. "What are you doing here?" "Networking," Caleb said, his smile too perfect, too calculated. "I heard about your project. Impressive." His gaze flicked to Luca, then back to Ezra, lingering on the scars. "You look good." Ezra's stomach twisted. The compliment felt like a lie, a reminder of Caleb's rejection. Luca stepped closer, his presence a shield. "He's more than good," Luca said, his tone light but edged with steel. "He's extraordinary." Caleb's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly. "I'd love to catch up, Ezra. Maybe dinner. For old time's sake." Ezra's mind raced. Caleb's charm was a siren song, pulling him back to a time when he'd felt whole. But Luca's hand in his was real, grounding him in the present. "I'm good," Ezra said, the words a quiet victory. "I've moved on." Caleb's face tightened, but he nodded and disappeared into the crowd. Luca pulled Ezra outside, the night air cool against their skin. "You okay?" he asked, his eyes searching. Ezra nodded, his chest lighter. "I think I am." He leaned into Luca, their foreheads touching. "Thank you for being you." Luca smiled, his thumb brushing Ezra's cheek. "Always." They kissed under the streetlights, the city humming around them, and Ezra felt a piece of himself click back into place. The next day, Ezra threw himself into his project with renewed focus. He was building something meaningful, something that could help others feel seen. But Caleb's reappearance had stirred something Elsia need to confront the past head-on. He dug through old photos, mementos of his life with Caleb, each one a reminder of the man he'd been. He wasn't that man anymore, and for the first time, that felt like a gift. That evening, Luca cooked dinner again, this time a spicy curry that filled his apartment with warmth. They talked about everything and nothing, their laughter weaving a cocoon around them. As they cleared the dishes, Ezra's hand brushed Luca's, and he paused. "I'm scared," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "Of this. Of us. I don't want to mess it up." Luca's eyes softened. "You won't. We're figuring this out together. Okay." He pulled Ezra into a hug, his heartbeat steady against Ezra's chest. It was a promise, fragile but real, and Ezra clung to it. As he walked home that night, the city's lights felt like stars guiding him forward. He was still healing, still learning to trust, but with Luca by his side, the future felt less like a cliff and more like a horizon. Ezra's project launched to acclaim, with tech blogs calling it a game-changer for accessibility. He stood in the spotlight at a launch event, his scars visible but no longer a barrier. The crowd's applause was a roar, but it was Luca's proud smile from the back of the room that grounded him. For the first time, Ezra felt like he was living for himself, not for anyone else's approval. But the past wasn't done with him. Caleb's texts became more frequent, each one a plea for a second chance. "I see you now," one read. "I was blind before." Ezra wanted to believe him, but the words felt hollow, like an echo of a life he'd outgrown. He showed the texts to Luca, expecting jealousy or anger, but Luca just listened, his calm a steady anchor. "You don't owe him anything," Luca said, his voice firm but kind. "But you owe yourself the truth. What do you want, Ezra?" The question lingered as Ezra navigated his new reality. Work was demanding, with meetings and interviews pulling him in every direction. But Luca was his constant, their evenings filled with quiet moments watching old movies, sharing stories, building something neither could name yet. Ezra wanted to call it love, but the word felt too big, too fragile. One night, Luca took Ezra to a drag show in the Castro, a whirlwind of glitter and defiance. Ezra laughed harder than he had in years, Luca's arm around him a quiet claim. But as they left, Caleb was there, waiting outside like a ghost that refused to fade. "Ezra, please," he said, his voice desperate. "I know I messed up. Let me make it right." Ezra froze, the air thick with tension. Luca stepped forward, his posture protective. "He's made his choice," Luca said, his voice low but unyielding. "Respect it." Caleb's eyes flashed with anger, but he backed off, disappearing into the crowd. Ezra's heart raced, torn between relief and guilt. Luca pulled him close, his breath warm against Ezra's ear. "You're not his anymore," he whispered. "You're yours." They walked home in silence, the city's pulse a backdrop to Ezra's thoughts. Luca was his own man now, scars and all. But Caleb's persistence was a reminder of how easily the past could pull him back. He needed to end it, not just for Luca, but for himself. The next day, Ezra met Caleb one last time, at a park overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge. The wind was sharp, cutting through Ezra's jacket. Caleb looked tired, his charm worn thin. "I love you," Caleb said, his voice breaking. "I always have." Ezra shook his head, the words no longer enough. "You loved who I was before the accident," he said. "But I'm not that person anymore. And I'm okay with that." He paused, then added, "I hope you find what you're looking for, Caleb. But it's not me." Caleb's face crumpled, but he nodded, walking away without another word. Ezra stood there, the bridge stretching into the distance, a symbol of connection and departure. He felt lighter, like a weight had lifted. That evening, he went to Luca's apartment, his heart full. Luca opened the door, his smile warm and open. "You did it," he said, pulling Ezra into a hug. "I'm proud of you." Ezra kissed him, fierce and certain, pouring everything into Ithis' fear, his hope, his gratitude. Luca kissed him back, their connection a promise of something real, something whole. For the first time, Ezra believed he could be loved, not despite his scars, but because of everything he was. Ezra's life began to feel like a new chapter, one he was writing with Luca by his side. Work was a whirlwind of success, his project now a model for accessibility nationwide. He spoke at conferences, his scars no longer a source of shame but a testament to his resilience. Reporters called him inspiring, but it was Luca's quiet pride that meant the most. Their relationship deepened, rooted in small moments, a shared glance during a crowded party, a late-night walk through the city's fog. Luca taught Ezra to cook, their laughter filling his tiny kitchen as they fumbled through recipes. Ezra taught Luca about coding, their evenings spent building silly apps just for fun. It was love, Ezra realized, not the fragile kind he'd known with Caleb, but something solid, built on trust. But scars, even healed ones, leave echoes. Ezra still caught himself flinching at mirrors, still wondered if Luca would one day see him the way Caleb had. The doubt was quieter now, but it lingered, a shadow he couldn't fully shake. Luca sensed it, his patience a steady hand guiding Ezra through the dark. One evening, Luca took Ezra to a community center in the Mission, where he volunteered teaching art to kids. The room was chaos-splattered tables, kids shouting, their creations vibrant and unpolished. Ezra watched Luca move through it all, patient and kind, his tattoos peeking out as he helped a girl mix colors. "This is where I find my center," Luca said later, as they cleaned up. "These kids, they don't care about your scars or your past. They just see you." Ezra's heart swelled. He wanted to be that fearless, to see himself the way Luca did. "How do you do it?" he asked. "How do you just let go of the noise?" Luca smiled, his eyes soft. "You don't let go. You just build something louder." He took Ezra's hand, leading him to a canvas. "Paint something," he said. "Whatever you're feeling." Ezra hesitated, then picked up a brush. He painted without thinking swirls of blue and gold, a chaotic blend of pain and hope. When he finished, Luca stood behind him, his arms around Ezra's waist. "That's you," he said. "Messy, beautiful, and all yours." The words broke something open in Ezra. He turned, kissing Luca with a fierceness that surprised them both. "I love you," he said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. Luca's smile was radiant, his eyes glistening. "I love you too," he whispered, and the world felt whole. But life wasn't a fairy tale. A week later, Ezra's project hit a snag funding issues that threatened to stall it. The stress pulled him back into old patterns, his insecurities flaring. He snapped at Luca one night, his frustration spilling over. "What if I'm not enough?" he said, his voice raw. "What if I fail at this, at us?" Luca didn't flinch. "You're enough," he said, his voice steady. "And we'll figure this out together." He pulled Ezra close, their foreheads touching, and the storm inside Ezra began to calm. They worked through it, side by side. Ezra fought for his project, securing new funding with a passion that surprised even him. Luca was there through it all, his belief in Ezra unwavering. As the project regained momentum, Ezra realized something. Love wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, scars and all, and choosing each other every day. Ezra stood on the stage at a national tech conference, the spotlight warm on his face. His project was a success, its impact rippling through communities he'd never imagined reaching. He spoke of resilience, of building tools that empowered everyone. His scars a silent testament to his words. The crowd rose to their feet, their applause a wave that carried him. But his eyes found Luca in the audience, his smile a beacon, and that was the victory that mattered most. Life with Luca was a dance, sometimes graceful, sometimes clumsy, but always real. They moved in together, their small apartment a patchwork of Ezra's tech gadgets and Luca's art supplies. Mornings were spent tangled in sheets, evenings filled with laughter and shared dreams. Ezra's scars were still there, but they no longer defined him. Luca's love had shown him that wholeness wasn't about erasing the past but embracing every piece of it. One spring evening, they returned to the beach where Luca had first confessed his feelings. The waves were gentle, the sky a canvas of pink and gold. Luca pulled Ezra close, his voice soft. "You've changed me," he said. "You've shown me what courage looks like." Ezra's eyes burned, his heart full. "You showed me what love is," he said, his voice steady. "Not just for you, but for myself." He traced Luca's jaw, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like a promise kept. As they sat on the sand, the city's lights twinkling in the distance, Ezra realized he'd found what he'd been searching for, not just love, but a sense of self that no rejection could shatter. Caleb had seen a broken body, but Luca had seen a whole heart. And in that love, Ezra had discovered his own strength, his own story, written in scars and hope and the unshakable belief that he was enough. Their journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more doubts, but they'd face them together. Ezra looked at Luca, his hand warm in his, and knew that this messy, beautiful, human connection was what wholeness truly meant.